The University of California Master Gardeners Program is part of the university's statewide Agricultural and Natural Resources Division. The UC Master Gardeners' mission is to extend the university's research-based knowledge on horticulture, pest management, and sustainable landscaping to California home gardeners. UC Master Gardeners receive thorough training from the UC and other horticulture professionals, and in return, commit to provide volunteer hours each year on our educational programs. Our local UC Master Gardener program covers Monterey, Santa Cruz, and San Benito counties, and was established about 30 years ago. Master Gardener volunteers offer free and low-cost educational classes, public information booths, and host special events, all aimed at helping home gardeners create successful and sustainable gardens. Our garden tours spotlight everyday gardens in our area. They are as beautiful as they are practical and sustainable. They are chosen based on thoughtful usage of sustainable landscape practices, and we hope you'll enjoy meeting these incredible gardeners and seeing their beautiful gardens as much as we have. And I hope you can join us at our next in-person garden tour.
Hi, I'm Phoebe. Welcome to our garden in the Sun Belt of Live Oak, Santa Cruz. We're in Zone 9B. We're about a mile away from the ocean. And this property is about a little less than a third of an acre on Amamutsan land. Come on in. Not to sound totally narcissistic, but I thought I'd start by saying a little about me and our family, because that is one of the first questions I have when looking at a new garden. I wonder who is taking care of this, what's their skill or experience level, and how much time do they have to spend on it? Because I want to know, can I do this kind of thing, or is this just way too unrealistic? So I'm the only gardener of the family. My husband helps with occasional garden tasks I give him, but he's not a gardener. His role is the chef of the family, so he cooks and preserves much of what we grow, which is also a very important role. We have 2 young kids who love playing and snacking in the garden, but aren't yet able to really contribute with tasks. We do occasionally hire a person to help pull weeds and lay down mulch and things like that. That's something I've allowed myself to do regularly this year for the first time, and it has been a huge help. But it's basically just me, and to be transparent, I would say this size is actually a bit too big for me to be sustainable in terms of my own labor. If it wasn't for bindweed, I could probably do it, but with bindweed, which is really a next level weed, it's more work than I can handle enjoyably. Our drought is so bad this year and water is so expensive that it's also a bit cost prohibitive to have a garden this size here. Even with drought-tolerant plants, rain tanks, and a lot of other water-saving measures, the water is still a really big issue. So, like I said, water is really our top issue here in Santa Cruz, and we have 2 of these giant rain barrels. They each hold just a little less than 3,000 gallons. Even on our worst drought years, we could easily fill like 3 or 4 of these, even when we're hardly getting any rain. So, just off our one roof. I feel really strongly that everyone should be harvesting rainwater in this area, and that our city should actually be subsidizing these for homeowners. That's something that I think us gardeners could really get behind and make some changes. In terms of my experience and skill level, I don't come from a gardening background or even an outdoorsy family. I started gardening for my mental health in my mid-20s. It's been the best antidepressant I have found and continues to be the most important self-care discipline in my life. I've taken some classes at my local community college, volunteered at farms, read a lot, then got into healing landscape design, got my permaculture design certification, then my certification in horticultural therapy. I learned the most through the simple act of putting time in the garden, though. You can read 1,000 books, but there's nothing that can substitute time in the garden and getting to know plant friends in person. I've been gardening for about 15 years or so now. I'm currently working on becoming a registered horticultural therapist, using cultivation and hands-on work with plants and soil as the medium of therapy. In this garden, my main focuses are in the relationships we have with plants and animals in this shared space, and using design to promote desired feelings and behaviors. Ornamental and ecological gardens are often positioned in opposition to one another, but I really want to push back on that. I believe creating beautiful ecological gardens plays a crucial role in the environmental movement because they are the most accessible tool we have to foster caring relationships between people and nature. A person's yard is like the gateway drug. If we can get them to plant it, the joy and care will come. So that's where we are coming from with this garden. I'm not the person to ask about Latin names, but bringing peace through flower choices, that's my wheelhouse. When we bought this property, the front yard was covered in plastic and thick gravel. It had been used as a truck and RV parking spot for over 10 years. I wouldn't have wanted it any other way though. This was a super ugly chain link fence when we moved in, and now it is our passion fruit trellis. A permaculture teacher once told me that those of us who have the passion and ability to heal the land should seek the land that needs healing. This land needed healing. There wasn't a single living creature in the concrete like dirt once we uncovered it. Not one worm, ant, or beetle. We used several rounds of cover crops, most notably mangled beet and giant radish to break up compaction, legumes to add nitrogen, then sheet mulched, then cover cropped again, then dug 2 big swales in the front, about 3 feet deep, and filled them with logs, brush, and wood chips. The swales slow down the water and give it a chance to sink more deeply. The wood debris soak up moisture and store it for months to come. We dug the dry creek swale to connect the top and bottom swales as sort of an overflow measure. Eventually our kitchen sink gray water will be connected to the top swale too, to provide more moisture in dry months. Our garden has 7 swales total, and all of them get covered by wood chips, so they just look like paths. It was not an overnight process to bring fertility back to this soil. Water management quickly became a priority after our first winter here when we discovered that the front and back had heavily flooded areas even with light rain. This is our blueberry bed, and it's actually a hugelkultur bed, which means it is built on top of lots of logs and twigs and different debris to be moisture retaining. And we put this in pretty early when we moved in. We collected pine trees all around the neighborhood after Christmas, and we were just dragging Christmas trees down the street to make this hugelkultur bed. In hindsight, I would have waited to plant these blueberries because this back zone, we just ignored it so much those first few years that these blueberries just did not get the care that they needed, and I'm probably actually going to rip them out and plant them again and start them all over again. So wait until you can actually take care of the plants that you plant. One of the reasons why this zone was one of the last zones that we did was because the flooding back here is so bad. This is the lowest point in our property. So right now I'm standing on a big swale. You can't see it, but it's dug 3 feet deep and filled with lots of debris, and it goes all the way around, and it's pretty much solved all the winter flooding problems. We call the front yard the pollinator garden, but it actually has a lot of edibles and useful herbs in it too. There are 14 fruit trees just in the front. Apples, lemon, nectarplum, aprium, fig, peach, etc. Rosemary, bay, lavender, yarrow, comfrey, and rose geranium are some of the useful herbs we have up here too. There are nectar and pollen sources for pollinators year-round, as well as beauty for us. I often get asked about how much maintenance is required. That's a hard one to answer because it really depends on your goals. It looks pretty tidy right now because we just mulched again and I've been doing a bunch of pruning, but I only do that about twice a year, once in late summer now, to get one more push of flowers in the next 2 months, and once in late winter when I clean up all the old stuff before new spring growth. The rest of the time I let it go wild because my goal is to mimic nature. In nature, plants overlap one another, shading the soil to retain moisture and creating habitat. They hold on to dead brush to protect themselves from frosts and keep their seed heads to feed the birds through winter. They drop their leaves to mulch the soil. So I mimic these things in the garden and don't do a ton of maintenance. The fruit tree pruning and spraying in the winter does take some time, but that's about it for this area. So I wanted to point out this Japanese maple because it kind of represents a perspective shift. This died suddenly this year. We don't know why. It went from totally healthy to pretty much dead overnight, so we're suspecting gopher damage. And I was gonna just cut it down, but when we eat dinner every night, which is right there, we watch a hummingbird friend sit on this tree every single night. So I could not take our friend's furniture away, basically. So we left this here just so we can enjoy the hummingbird and so we can see the hummingbird zip by us and say hello during dinner. This flower is a Peruvian lily, Indian summer, and it's probably one of the most asked about flowers in my garden. It blooms for us pretty much all year and very, very easy plant. It's surrounded by an acacia cousin it, which is a really funny character. I always put Daphne Adora right by my front door because I love the smell in the winter. So we added this grape arbor to provide shade in the summer, and it actually keeps our house almost 20 degrees cooler in the summer just by providing shade. In the winter, of course, it's deciduous, so it drops its leaves and it allows the sun to warm our house in the winter. Our kids also really like it as the shady play spot. In permaculture, we were taught to put veggie beds in zone 1 closest to the house. But if you're a veggie gardener, you know that there are a lot of times during the year when your beds look less than beautiful. Sometimes they are riddled with pest and disease issues, and the to-do list can be endless. Gazing out the window and seeing that can actually be stress-inducing. So I actually disagree with the typical permaculture advice here. I want the fragrant, pretty, relaxing stuff right out my window. This is the view that we see from our bedroom, and I don't want to be looking at my to-do list. We can actually hear the trickling of the pond through our door in the summer. We leave the screen door open at night and we smell the jasmine coming in and the trickling sound of the water, and it's just bliss. This is the Magidome. We just added this spring and it's been such a joy. It's kind of a quasi-greenhouse, a very cheap quasi-greenhouse. All the tropicals are really happy in here, as are the peppers, and it's a great place to propagate and one of my favorite places to sit and chill. So something I get really excited about is trellising, and every fence is an opportunity for a trellis. Every trellis is an opportunity to bring some whimsy into the garden. This fence is separating our dog area from our veggie area, and we have asparagus growing along it, dahlias, some tree collards, this really pretty black-eyed Susan vine, which is pink, as you can see. And on the other side is tayberries, which are prolific and a cross between raspberries and blackberries. We've got cucumber trellises, beans up trellises. These are all cattle panels that we just curved by hand. And then we have winter squash in the background, another bean trellis. This year we did our tomatoes on a sort of a tunneled trellis. This cucumber trellis, I just made this out of old bamboo and some prunings from our grapevine and some rope. And the cucumbers are thriving. This cucumber is called green apple, and it's very productive and does not get bitter. This is a purple corn that's new to me this year, but it's got to be the most gorgeous corn I've ever seen. The pollen is white and it just hangs like it's like little chandeliers, nature's chandeliers. This is not a pretty part of the garden, but it's really the heart of the garden. When we moved here and started growing our own food, we quickly realized we could not produce enough compost for ourselves. There's no trees around here, so we don't have any leaf mold. We don't have anything. So we started a community composting program, and it's totally free, and we collect about 30 families' vegetable waste, and they just drop off a 5-gallon bucket. They take another clean bucket, we bring it back here, and we do a lot of composting. Another example of our composting is these in-bed compost towers, and they go all the way down to the ground, and we just top them up. We never harvest them, but it continues to feed the soil. This is a herb spiral, which is a common design technique in permaculture. It makes the most space out of vertical space, and we've got lots of different herbs in here. One of the things you'll notice in our garden is that we mix up a lot of the plants, what's known as polyculture, and that is because diversity actually makes the garden stronger and more resilient. This is our free take, give, swap stand, and we put it out once a week in the summer with all our extra produce. We feel really strongly that with this privilege of having such a big lot, it's really our responsibility to also share. So this is usually loaded once a week in the summer if you want to come on by. You can also find me on Instagram at Organically Growing, and thanks for coming.